Everyone's calling Zoro and Sanji the wings, but nobody actually explains what that means. They just say it like it settles something. But Oda doesn't waste words, never has. So when the wings title shows up in canon, it's not decoration, it's a clue. And the clue points all the way back 800 years. Joy Boy had power, Joy Boy had allies, but Joy Boy still failed to bring the dawn. And the wings are the reason why. So let's start where most people don't, the actual phrase. The term Wings of the Pirate King gets applied specifically to Zoro and Sanji. Not the monster trio, not the crew, just those two. And the timing matters. Oda chose that title for Luffy's era only. Roger never had wings, Whitebeard never had wings. That word choice is deliberate. Now think about what a wing actually does. A wing doesn't follow, a wing doesn't just support, a wing makes flight possible. You remove one wing from a bird and the whole thing crashes. It doesn't glide, it doesn't limp forward, it goes down fast. That isn't a compliment. That's a structural fact. And here's the thing most people walk right past. Rogers had Rayleigh and Gabin, two of the most powerful pirates who ever lived. Rayleigh trained Luffy personally. Gabin was a force of nature. But Oda never once called either of them wings. Not in a flashback, not in an SBS, not anywhere. They were crew, they were family, but they were not wings. So why does that label only exist now? Well, the answer sits inside what each wing actually provides. And this is where I think the fandom has been sleeping on something massive. A wing is not just power. Power is common at the top of the Grand Line. Every Yonko has powerful crewmates. That's not the point. A wing is a specific type of power that balances the center. Think of it like a blade with two edges. One edge cuts what needs to die. The other edge protects what needs to live. Take away either edge and the blade is useless. Zoro and Sanji aren't just strong, they're structurally opposites. Zoro cuts, Sanji protects. Zoro judges, Sanji preserves. One moves towards death to shield the dream, the other moves towards life to feed it. Together they form something complete. Separately, they're just two very strong guys on a boat. But check this out, in every major arc post-time skip, the top villain targets one wing specifically. Not Luffy, a wing. Kaido breaks Zoro on the roof. Big Mom goes after Sanji through his family. That's not random. Oda is showing you something. He's showing you that if you want to stop the Pirate King before he reaches his throne, you don't aim for the center, you clip the wings first. And Joy Boy had no wings. He had allies. He probably had Toki. He had incredible power and a plan so brilliant that Rogers cried when he read it. But the structural requirement that Luffy has right now, that specific balance of judgment and survival flanking the center, Joy Boy went into the final battle without it. And we know how that ended. The dawn never came. The sun disappeared from the world. And 800 years of darkness followed. That's not a coincidence. That's a blueprint. So let's talk about Joy Boy's failure, because most fans frame it wrong. They say he was too early. They say the conditions weren't right. They say Shirahoshi wasn't born yet. And those things are partially true, but they're incomplete. And incomplete answers are how you miss the real point. Here's what the research tells us. The promised time was never about one condition. It was about multiple conditions arriving together. Shirahoshi was one piece. Nika returning was another. Momonosuke opening Wano's border was another. None of those events alone is the promised day. They're all the setup. They're all the groundwork for something bigger. The Sea Kings knew this. Characters like Toki and Roger knew this. They weren't waiting on a person. They were waiting on a complete arrangement. And here is the detail that gets skipped. Poseidon has been born roughly every 100 years. So Shirahoshi was not a once-in-a-history miracle. She was one of many Poseidons across those 800 years. The Sea Kings were not waiting on just her. They were waiting on the full picture. Which means the full picture requires more than Poseidon, more than Nika. More than one sovereign. So what was missing in Joy Boy's era? Joy Boy was the most powerful person alive at the time. I genuinely believe that. The man left a message so detailed and so emotionally devastating that it made an entire crew of hardened pirates laugh and cry at the same time. He sent the One Piece forward through time to protect it, allegedly. He had Toki. He had Lily. He had a plan that spanned 8 centuries. That's not a man who failed from weakness. That's a man who failed from an incomplete arrangement. His allies were powerful but unbalanced. Think about a ship with a brilliant captain and a full crew but no rudder and no engine. The captain knows exactly where to go, everyone on board is committed, but without those 2 specific mechanical functions, the ship can't move in a straight line under pressure. It spins, it drifts, it never arrives. Joy Boy had no one whose entire purpose was to cut what needed to die. No one whose entire identity was built around protecting what needed to live. He had fighters, he had allies, but the wing structure, that specific 2-sided balance of judgment and survival flanking the center, simply did not exist in his arrangement. And Oda has been careful about this. Roger reached Laugh Tale and found the poneglyphs. He read the full story, and his conclusion was not that Joy Boy was weak. His conclusion was that Joy Boy's time had not yet come. Roger understood he was also too early. And then Roger spent his final years doing exactly one thing. He made sure that when the right person arrived, the conditions would finally be complete. He set Shanks in motion to find the Nika fruit. He inspired Whitebeard to protect the seas. He sent ripples forward through every person he touched. Roger was not building toward a stronger fighter. He was building toward a complete arrangement. One where the center, the wings, and the ancient weapons all arrive at the same moment. Joy Boy had the center, he never had the wings. And without the wings, even the most powerful Joy Boy in history could not open the door. The door has 3 keyholes. Joy Boy only ever had 1 key. Now let's talk about Zoro, because people think they know his arc. Guy wants to be the world's greatest swordsman. Guy trains hard. Guy gets stronger. Simple. But that reading misses everything underneath. Zoro's arc is not about personal glory. It stopped being about that the moment he made his vow to Luffy at Thriller Bark. Here is what actually happened there. Luffy was dying. The whole crew was down. Kuma arrived and offered one condition: hand over the captain. Zoro didn't hesitate long. He walked up to a warlord of the sea and said, "Take me instead." And then he absorbed every last drop of Luffy's accumulated pain, his wounds, his fatigue, his near-death state into his own body. Sanji watched it happen. When he found Zoro afterward, standing in a literal pool of his own blood, he asked what happened. Zoro said, "Nothing." That's not a swordsman chasing a personal dream. That's a wing doing its job. And here's something worth paying attention to. Zoro's Conqueror's Haki did not awaken from training. It didn't show up because he worked hard enough in a gym somewhere. It manifested on that rooftop while he was holding the line for Luffy. His will is so tied to Luffy's dream that the Haki of a king appeared in him without him even knowing it was there. Kaido felt it and was shocked. Zoro was confused. That gap between what Zoro consciously wants and what his body unconsciously produces tells you everything about what he actually is. He's not chasing greatness for himself. His will is fueling someone else's throne. Now look at Enma. Most people see it as a sword upgrade. Get the better blade, hit harder, win. But Enma has a specific history that matters here. Enma scarred Kaido. That scar exists on the most durable creature alive. Nothing else has done that except Odin. And Odin was the only person before Zoro who could even hold the sword. Think about what that lineage means. Odin tried to open Wano's borders to prepare the world for the dawn. He failed. He died. He passed the blade forward. Zoro picked it up and finished what Odin started. He scarred Kaido. He didn't kill him, but he marked him. He left a permanent record on history's toughest body that someone was coming for that throne. A wing doesn't always close the deal. Sometimes a wing just makes sure the door stays open long enough for the center to walk through. And there's something worth knowing about Zoro's ancestry that Oda confirmed in SBS. Zoro descends from Ryuma, the legendary samurai who slew a dragon. In the one-shot manga Monsters, which Oda confirmed is canon. His entire story is about a man who fights not for fame, but to protect others from a threat they can't face alone. Zoro inherited that sword. He inherited that will. And Joy Boy's era had a dragon problem too. The parallel is not subtle. Think of Zoro as a pin inside a spinning top. Luffy spins fast. He generates real force. But a top without a fixed center point just wobbles and falls. The pin is what keeps all that speed from flying apart. It doesn't move. It doesn't shine. But pull it out and the whole thing collapsed sideways. Joy Boy's top had no pin. It wobbled. It fell. He had no Zoro. And that's only half the wing. Now we have Sanji, and this is where it gets wild. Sanji was born as a weapon. His father engineered him to feel nothing. No empathy, no mercy, no hesitation. A perfect soldier for the Germa war machine. Judge spent years trying to strip his son of the one thing that makes Sanji dangerous. And he failed completely. Sanji came out of that experiment wrong by his father's standards. He could feel everything. He cried. He protected people. He refused to hurt women even when it cost him the fight. Judge saw that as a defect. I think Oda sees it as the whole point. Here's my honest opinion. Sanji's failure to become a weapon is the single most important moment in his origin, because it means every power he's built since then comes from a choice, not from a lab, not from a lineage, but from a man who keeps deciding over and over that humanity is worth protecting. Ifrit Jambe is not a genetic upgrade. It's what happens when a person burns so hot with conviction that the fire becomes real. His body produces what his will demands. That's the opposite of engineering. And that matters for the wing theory in a very specific way. Where Zoro cuts what needs to die, Sanji protects what needs to live. That's not a poetic way of saying they both fight. That's a structural description of two different functions. Zoro's entire instinct is judgment. He reads a threat and removes it. Sanji's entire instinct is survival. He reads a need and he answers it. One function faces towards death, the other faces towards life. Both are necessary, neither works alone. Also, Sanji is the only Straw Hat who has consistently saved enemies mid-battle. He fed a starving Gin after Gin's crew tried to kill everyone at the Baratie. He baked a wedding cake that saved millions of lives on Whole Cake Island, including people actively trying to murder his crew. He couldn't let Big Mom scream herself into a rampage even though Big Mom was the enemy. That pattern is not a quirk. That is a function. A wing that faces towards life doesn't turn that function off just because the situation is dangerous. Think of it this way. A fire needs two things to burn, fuel and air. Zoro is the fuel, dense, contained, catastrophic when ignited. Sanji is the air, constant, moving, the invisible thing that keeps the whole reaction going. You can stack all the fuel in the world. Without air, it just sits there. Without fuel, the air moves but nothing burns. Luffy is the spark, but a spark without fuel and air is just a moment. It disappears fast. Joy Boy had a spark. The man was extraordinary, but there was no sustained reaction. The fire never caught, and without that sustained reaction, the dawn couldn't arrive. Now look at Sanji's dream, all blue. One ocean where all four seas meet. A place where all the world's waters come together. Think about what that actually means. Sanji isn't dreaming of the best kitchen. He's dreaming of a world with no borders. A world where things that were always kept apart finally connect. That's the same dream as the dawn of the world. One man looking for where all the seas meet. One crew trying to bring where all people unite. Sanji didn't accidentally become a wing. His dream was always pointing at the same destination as Luffy's. He just came at it from a different direction. And that direction is exactly what the prophecy needed. Now let's put all this together, because everything we just covered, Zoro's judgment, Sanji's survival, Joy Boy's failure, the promised time, it all runs back to one source, the Void Century, and what that century actually recorded. Most people think the poneglyphs are history books. They're not. They're instructions. They record what happened, but they also record what's required. And the requirement for the dawn of the world is more specific than the fandom gives it credit for. So here it is. Toki was from the Void Century. Oda didn't have to make that choice. He could have said she came from any point in the past. 1 century ago, 3 centuries ago, 5? It wouldn't have changed a single moment of her role in Wano. But Oda specifically placed her in the Void Century. That's deliberate. Toki existed alongside Joy Boy. She saw the failure firsthand, and her fruit, the ability to send things forward in time, was used for one purpose: to make sure the right pieces arrived at the right moment. She didn't just send the scabbards forward. The theory is strong. Joy Boy might have sent the One Piece itself forward through Toki, not to Laugh Tale to sit and wait, forward to a specific point in time, which is why Roger arrived and found nothing he could use. There was nothing there yet. Roger read the message. He understood he was early, and then he did what Roger does. He made sure the world would be ready when the treasure finally arrived. Now think about what that means for the wings. If the One Piece is tied to a specific moment in time, and that moment requires specific conditions to unlock it, then Zoro and Sanji aren't crew members who happen to be strong. They're conditions. They're part of the arrangement that makes the promised day possible. Roger was too early, not just because Shirahoshi wasn't born yet. Roger had no one who fulfilled the wing requirement. Rayleigh was extraordinary. Gabin was extraordinary. But neither of them was built the way Zoro is built. Neither carried the specific function that Sanji carries. They were powerful allies. They weren't wings. And that gap, that missing structural requirement, meant Roger couldn't have brought the dawn even if every condition had been perfect. The lock has 3 keyholes. I said that earlier. But now I want to be specific about what each key is. The center key is Joy Boy returned, Luffy. The second key is Poseidon, Shirahoshi. The third key is the wings, both of them together. That is the complete arrangement. Pull any of those 3 and the door stays shut. Joy Boy had the center key, he never had the third. Roger had the center key too, still no third. And without all 3 turning at once, the lock doesn't move. The Sea Kings weren't waiting on Shirahoshi alone. They were waiting on something more specific. They spoke about the promised time like it had already been calculated. Like they knew the exact shape of what's to come. That level of certainty doesn't come from watching one condition develop. It comes from knowing the full list and watching each item arrive one by one. Zoro scarring Kaido, Sanji choosing humanity over weaponization at his lowest point. Both happened in Wano. The same arc where the borders of a closed nation finally cracked open. The same arc where the scabbards arrived from the past exactly on schedule. Nothing in Wano was random. Every piece that landed there was supposed to land there, including those 2 men and the specific functions they carry. My opinion on this is firm. The Void Century was not just a record of a war. It was a blueprint for a solution. And that blueprint required a specific kind of pirate king, not just the strongest person alive. The strongest person alive with 2 very specific wings locked into place beside him. Joy Boy understood that. He just couldn't build it in time. So he sent everything forward and waited for someone who could. So what does this mean for the final war? Because if the wings are a prophecy requirement, the final war isn't just Luffy versus Emu, it's a test. A test of whether the wings hold under the kind of pressure that broke Joy Boy's entire arrangement 800 years ago. And Oda has already shown you the shape of that test. The wings don't just fight. They absorb the damage that would otherwise destroy the dream itself. But the final war will test whether this generation built the thing Joy Boy couldn't. Not just a strong pirate king, a complete arrangement. A sun with 2 wings built from 800 years of preparation. Zoro and Sanji didn't find Luffy by accident. And when this war ends, those wings will be the reason it ends in dawn and not darkness. That's the secret Oda has been building since chapter 1. Now family, you know Shanks is hiding something from the world. But I solved it. So click on that video that just popped up, and I will see you on the next one.